It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Welcome to County-Wide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you in studio today. With our guest today is Prescott National Forest wildlife biologist Noel Fletcher. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
And we started before the show, and the last time you were here, we were just radio.
We were, so
in a small booth.
Prepared for this.
Yeah, so that's years ago, so shame on us for not having you back sooner. But I got to thinking about you when you sent out the press release a couple weeks back about the peregrine falcons and the climbing faces there, and we're going to be opened up in Prescott, Thumb Butte, and Granite Mountain. And so we thought we need to get her back in here, because every time I talk to you, especially about the bald eagles, I'm always amazed with the information you have.
Well, thank you.
And they're great stories. So I'm glad you're here today. Before we get started, I want to know, why is Noel Fletcher a wildlife biologist, and what do you do? What is a wildlife biologist?
A person who is a wildlife biologist manages the wildlife habitat for the animals on the National Forest. What's different between the Forest Service and the Game and Fish is we manage the habitat, the land, the plants, and the features, and the Game and Fish tends to manage more of the animals themselves.
Okay.
So our job, if you're not going to have any animals if you don't have the habitat.
Sure.
And so our job is to manage that habitat in line with the multiple use concept for the Forest Service, and that is our job is to balance what the wildlife needs with what people want in within the bounds of law, policy, manual, and direction. So we might have our forest plan that says we're going to provide recreation opportunities, and we also have the Endangered Species Act that says we're going to protect threatened and endangered species. And then we have some other laws that mandate us to have healthy forests. So we need to balance all of those different demands on those resources for the most good. And that's why we work in an interdisciplinary way with recreation specialists and minerals and forest health and silviculture and lands folks to figure out what is going to be the best thing that we can do on this piece of ground. And the beautiful part is the best thing on this piece of ground isn't necessarily the best piece on this piece of ground. So the priorities can shift and change a little bit. Hence, Alto Pit. What a great place to go ride your OHV or your mountain bike or other mountain bikes versus Granite Mountain Wilderness. They are within eyesight of each other.
Right.
And they have such different mandates as to how they will be managed and their uses, and that's how we balance those demands. Now, Alto Pit isn't going to have a lot of wildlife in it. Granite Mountain has peregrines nesting on a very, very popular rock climbing area. And to balance the uniqueness of that rock climbing area for rock climbing and for peregrines, we have closures to allow the peregrines to nest, and then we open it so that the climbers can climb. And our job is to bring forth the information so that decision makers, line officers, district rangers, and forest supervisors can make informed decisions on how to best manage the resources that they have.
So you're trying to make everybody happy, plus all the animals happy, plus the earth itself happy. That's quite a task.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And the challenge is to, not have too narrow a vision or a perspective on putting animals before people or people before animals. That's not my job. That's the line officer makes the decision on the trade-offs. My job is to provide the information so that the decision maker can make the decisions they need to make.
What made you decide to become a wildlife biologist?
I took a wrong turn. When I was a little girl, growing up on a horse farm in Pennsylvania, I wanted to be James Herriot.
Wow.
Read all the books, just adored him. Started out pre-vet and realized that was a lot of work. And so when I transferred from college in Pennsylvania to college in Idaho, I figured wildlife was the next closest thing. I couldn't have been more wrong, and I love it. I started at the University of Idaho studying wildlife, and I went into the habitat area of it, got a job, summer job in 1983 with the Forest Service. cutting trees down, and which was pre-commercial thinning, because you can't grow the trees too close together or they won't get big.
Right.
And I started out doing stand exam, which I thought was the best job in the world. They paid me to hike around looking at trees.
Spend all day outside, huh?
With my friends.
Now, you've been at the Prescott National Forest for a long time.
95.
Since 95. Yeah. I was going to say, I've known you as long as I've been doing the news.
Yeah.
And then Debbie Manili as well. You guys have both been there for a long time. You see forest people move from one forest to the next, but it's usually the supervisor, it seems like.
No. Typically people move around to get promoted and to move up. And I am married to City of Prescott Sergeant Fletcher.
Okay.
And for him to promote, he needs to stay in place. And so, talk about balancing and trade-offs.
You stay right here, huh?
My career is in a holding pattern, while my husband's career runs its course, and my kids, taking care of kids and family and being a mom. So I have two beautiful daughters. Hannah's 15, counting the minutes till her driver's permit, and Olivia is 12 and can't wait for the soccer season to start. So horses and soccer.
I think we're going to take our first break a little early. And when we come back, I want to get an update on the peregrine falcons.
Great.
Okay, and we'll talk bald eagles too. That's my favorite to talk with you about, bald eagles. So stick around. Noel Fletcher from the Prescott National Forest. She's the wildlife biologist there. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 110 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 600% increase in the last 20 years. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
You didn't give up on sex, don't give up on birth control either. There are more methods than you think. Find yours at bedsider.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you in studio today. Prescott National Forest wildlife biologist Noel Fletcher in studio. We've talked about what it is to be a wildlife biologist. Peregrine falcons.
Peregrines.
When do they show up in our area?
Some think they never leave. It depends.
Oh.
If we have a mild enough winter, they won't leave. Some people have said, I saw him here in November. I saw him here. And sometimes they leave. It depends. When do they start nesting? February 1st.
February 1st.
And that date, it was taken from the recovery plan from when they were listed under the Endangered Species Act. And what they do is they take all the data from all the nesting and they go, when's the best date to start and stop, to give them the best opportunity if we're going to do a closure or protection or manage any conflict within a nesting area. So February 1st has been the beginning of the breeding season for as long as I've been involved in managing peregrines.
So if they do leave, where do they go?
They go south to South America.
Okay.
And that has been part of what contributed to their listing. Is in the 60s and 70s, they identified that DDT was accumulating in their bodies, and what was happening is it's called an endocrine disruptor.
Wow.
It interrupts the development of the eggshell, and they would be very thin. And the parents typically turn the eggs in the nest as they're incubating them, and the DDT affected the eggshells, and they'd be so thin that a parent turning its egg would break it, and it would die. And we banned it here in the U.S., but it didn't get banned in other countries where they migrate for the winter and their prey migrate. So the problem was really international. It was global. It was we had to go to the southern hemisphere, and so they have been able to recover just because we've made so many strides, both here and in South America.
When did they first start showing up, and when did we notice that they were all of a sudden, there they are on, is it Thumb Butte was the first one?
No, Granite Mountain.
Granite Mountain was the
Mountain
first,
was
okay.
the main place where they would start being most obvious in the beginning of the breeding season. I don't know when they first showed up at Granite Mountain, because I only got here in '95. They were there when I got here, and when I got here, there was no hard and fast dates or times, and I recommended we adhere more strictly to the Endangered Species Act and have firm dates, because what happens is weather varies. And so when the breeding season starts is often tied to the length of the daylight and the weather conditions. And if the beginning of the breeding season, courtship and nest building, is disrupted, you really don't have the rest of the breeding season. And so the presence of people climbing on Granite Mountain was interrupting and interfering with courtship and nest building.
Right.
And so by not having people there, it was coincidental that the first 7 years we started having a closure February 1st, we started routinely producing 2 and 3 young off the face of Granite Mountain.
Nice.
Coincidentally.
Yeah, coincidentally. But now those two they've had quite a, now let me ask you this, and are these two peregrine that go to Granite Mountain, are they there every year, the same ones every year?
You know, we have never gotten our hands on them to know that. If I were a gambling person, I would say yes. They're very territorial. They mate for life, and it's a great site, as evidenced by producing 2 and 3 young. Most nests will produce 1 and 2. The fact that they routinely produce 2 and 3 for 7 years tells me it's a very, very successful and productive site. They produce so many that their young looked for suitable sites.
They're at the house next door, aren't they?
So, and I remember this so distinctly because I was home on maternity leave the summer of 1997 when I got a frantic phone call. We have peregrines at Thumb Butte. What do we do? What do we do? Like, give them some space. Yeah. So now we have peregrines that routinely spend time at Thumb Butte nesting. That is a little bit more of a challenge because it's not a wilderness area. It's very close to town, and it's right in a lot of people's backyards. And apparently a really fun thing to do is throw rocks off the top of Thumb Butte, and that's not conducive to peregrine nesting, really. It's not as popular for the climbing, but it is for scrambling and bouldering at the base and going up to the top and doing things. And so peregrines are visually they catch their prey with their sight and their speed, and so they're very visually sensitive. People at the base of a cliff face underneath a nest site is going to distract the male from foraging and protecting it against predators because of the movement of people in or near a nest site.
That makes sense.
That's why the closure at Thumb Butte includes the slope below the cliff face and above it, so that people can't get within range to have things come off the top of it.
What's the primary food, the peregrine?
Birds on the wing. They like to take things on the wing. They're fastest bird.
I've seen that before.
200 miles per hour. They hit them in midair with a somewhat closed foot, and they stun them, and then they usually come back around and catch them before they hit the ground.
Amazing.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
pretty
it
impressive.
is.
The coolest thing I ever saw while we were out at Granite Mountain, we were monitoring the peregrines there, and the peregrine is not a large bird.
No, it's very small.
It's like this big, and they're small. You can tell them in flight by their angled wings and the quickness of them. A raven got too close to the territory at Granite, and a raven's this tall.
Big bird.
Peregrine hit it in midair, and it fell like a rock.
Wow. Well, you said they go 200 miles an hour, right?
I know, but they usually don't hit things bigger than themselves, but it was defending its territory.
Sure.
A lot of people that, if you haven't seen it, you wouldn't believe it. It was pretty impressive to watch. But they like to take their prey on the wing, and because they can fly so fast, they will range quite a distance from their nest site. I have seen peregrines. Now I routinely go by Willow Lake. But there's also, I happen to know of a pair that nests in the granite dells on private property. And so that is a treat because there's more birds than they know what to do with all around Willow Lake between smaller waterfowl and all the birds that are brought to that. So it's kind of cool. But so the granite birds are going to be hitting the stock tanks and the riparian corridors in Willow Lake. The granite dells birds are going to be hitting Willow Lake. The Thumb Butte peregrines, they've got a ton of bird feeders in their backyard.
Residential area, huh? We're not going to have time to talk about the eagles. We've got a minute before we have to take a break.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump into the bald eagles real quick. How did you do this year?
With the peregrines, I'm still...
No, with the eagles. The peregrines we don't know yet, right?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
And the eagles, the pair at Lynx Lake did not nest, which is disappointing. However, the pair at Del Rio Springs was very successful and fledged 2 young, which was a huge success story for them.
That's good news.
Yeah, for that
Now, do we know
territory.
about the pair in Clarkdale? Well, I don't think Clarkdale or Camp Verde, neither one, because both of those were lifted early, the closures.
Yes, and usually with the closures lifted early, that means that they were not successfully breeding.
Okay, all right. We're going to take a 2-minute break. When we come back, tell me 2 or 3 different things about bald eagles that I may not know.
Okay.
And our listeners and viewers may not know. I'm Paul David, Prescott National Forest wildlife biologist Noel Fletcher in studio today. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
I was in junior high the first time I caught my mom using denial. She had to have known her painkillers were missing because I kept stealing them. Her denial was so out of hand.
So she doesn't even know?
I'm going out.
It was like I could get away with anything.
You kids have fun.
And that was when I knew. When she was addicted to denial.
Denial is a drug. Get help. The partnership at drugfree.org.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
Now, some action from the courts. Billie Jean King renewing her rivalry with Arthritis. First set, furious volley, and right to the net for a winner. Beautiful forehand there. Arthritis, stunned. And here, match point. Billie Jean with the ace, taking it in straight sets. Afterwards, a jubilant Billie Jean King.
Tennis is a weapon for me with arthritis. There's nothing like it for me to hit a ball, run to the ball, anytime, any court. I'm ready. Let's go.
What's your weapon against arthritis? Find out at fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm Paul David, Prescott National Forest wildlife biologist Noel Fletcher in studio, and we've got a So we got 3 minutes left to talk bald eagles.
Oh, wow.
Give me something that I don't know about bald eagles.
Bald eagles, the specific name for them, leucocephalus, means white head, and that is where we get, they're named after why they look. They also have 5 distinct plumages, which I didn't know. And the way you can tell I'm going to get this backwards, bald eagle and a golden eagle, one of them has feathers all the way down to the feet. And I believe that's the golden and the bald. And the bald only has it partially down. Now the bald eagles from here, when they nest during our winter, which is December through June, they go up to the Dakotas and Minnesota for the summer.
I think that's amazing. It's such a trip.
It is. We put a GPS unit on a nestling at Lynx, and her parents took her from Lynx Lake to the Dakotas during the first 3 weeks of July.
And they mate for life.
Eagles mate for life. They choose a mate, and if something does happen to the mate, they will choose a new one. But they do mate for life.
Which we saw happen.
And we did at Lynx, and they typically can live to be 15 to 25 years old in the wild.
See, that was going to be another one of my questions.
Huge, 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 huge. Which they become reproductively mature 4 to 5 years old, which is usually when they're coming into their adult plumage, and mate for life, usually the same territory. Like the lynx eagles, they've had 3 different nest sites within the same breeding area, as they're called. Their primary food is carrion. They're also their other primary dead animals.
Okay.
But their other primary food is waterfowl and fish. Okay. Huge, which is one of the main things that contributes to us needing to balance what they need with what people want, because what's limited in Arizona? Water. So the eagles are drawn to where people are drawn to recreate.
Sure.
And so hence Lynx Lake, Roosevelt, Pleasant, the Verde. These are all places where people are drawn to the water, and the birds are drawn to the water. The birds need it to survive, and the people want it to recreate. And so balancing those demands is a huge part, hence our closures. And it's not that we, like on the Verde, people are allowed to pass through. We just ask that they not stop within a certain distance. And at Lynx, we just gave them a buffer so that they could have a piece of the shoreline to rest or to bring their food and to hunt from. So it's always a balancing act.
Do we have a lot of eagles in the state?
They are doing really well. They're coming back. They were actually delisted in, I want to get this right, 2007.
Okay.
Taken off the endangered.
That's awesome.
Both the peregrine and the bald eagle are success stories of delisting from having been dangerously low. Both were endangered. Then they were taken down to threatened, and they were both taken off the endangered species list, which is huge. It's absolutely huge.
We're out of time. I'm going to have you come back just before the bald eagle closure comes. We'll have you come back and we'll talk just bald eagles for the whole show, because we just have I got so many more questions. And then just as the peregrine come in, we'll have you come back and do just the peregrines, okay? All right. Noel Fletcher, thanks for coming in. It's good to see you. I'm Paul David. That's today's Countywide. We'll talk to you again next time.